I'm Rachael Woody. I'm here with Bob Switzer and Jim Straus at Seven Bridges Winery, and it is July 25th, 2016. And my first question for you guys is, why wine?
I like to drink wine. I got into wine after college. I had a job in Silicon Valley, and my grandparents lived in Sonoma. And I hadn't seen them a whole lot growing up. I grew up on the East Coast, and so I would go visit them a lot on the weekends. And what are you going to do up there but go wine tasting? And so we did a lot, and I got to be exposed to a lot of different wines, and got to drink some pretty nice wine, and really grew to just love the whole the wine itself, but also the community, the wineries, and getting to see how things were done. And so later, when I had an opportunity to get into it as a business, actually as a hobby, it started, I was excited to do that.
So I also like wine, which I think is kind of a prerequisite to getting into this business. I got to say, pretty much since I was old enough to drink, whatever age that might have been, I've always gravitated towards wine. Actually, as far as getting into the wine business, it's totally because Bob started making wine. I liked his wine. He invited me to kind of join him. So it's been really fun. I've enjoyed the whole process.
How did you two meet?
We're neighbors.
Yeah, we have our daughters are best friends, and so I think they met first and started hanging out. And then,
without a doubt.
Yeah, and we met that way.
Mm-hmm. And did each of you have like a gateway wine, or one of those wines where it's just like, oh, this is love, this is meant to be?
Yeah, I did. There are a lot of wines that I like, but the first one that was that way for me was a Zinfandel. From Sonoma's place I used to go with my grandparents, and it was from Limerick Lane. I think it was probably like a 94, 95.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that there's one that stands out for me, but certainly the type of wine that we make is what I gravitate towards, and what I really enjoy. So the bigger red wines are most attractive to me.
Mm-hmm. And how did you guys go from it being a hobby to a legitimate operation?
Yeah. So when we started, it was myself and Kevin Ross, who's a friend of mine, and he had been making wine in his garage as a hobby, and I joined him one fall. I said, hey, I'd like to see what you're doing, and pretty quick, I fell very hard and fast for the whole process. It was a lot of fun. It was everything I kind of thought it would be, and more satisfying, more rewarding. And so we were scheming about, we were making pretty good wine, but we were talking about, well, how could we make it better? And how good of a wine could we make? And so, well, to make better wine, we'll have to make more. We need enough to put the wine into barrels. We want to be able to blend some different varietals and that sort of thing. And pretty quick, looking at those numbers, that was too much to make as a hobby. And so we decided the way around that was if we got a commercial license, then we could just sell the wine to some of our friends, like Jim, and he could pay for our hobby. And so that was the big plan.
How convenient for you.
Yeah, it was going to be really small, and just to see what we could do. So once it started, it's kind of addictive. We get access to different grapes, and I want to try that, I want to do this, and all of a sudden it got bigger and bigger, and the wine was better than what I ever thought we could make. And so then I wanted to make more, and so then it became a really legitimate business fairly quickly.
So again, I reckon compare this to Tom Sawyer whitewashing the fence, right? So, look how much fun we're having, and look how great this is. And then, I start actually working with Bob and Kevin, and that seems like it's a lot of fun. And then eventually, well, maybe I should just be part of the business. Again, I was tricked into it, basically.
We started with free labor, which was good. But that wasn't good enough. Then we needed some money too.
Wow, so paying for his own labor.
Yeah,
exactly.
Nice.
Yeah.
And describe your respective roles with this business.
I do the winemaking, that's my main role. Most of the operational activities are under my. Either I do it firsthand or have some helpers.
Okay.
And I sell the wine mostly through other helpers.
Have you guys ever dabbled in sort of the other person's realm, or is it pretty separate?
No, there's a lot of crossover. Jim's done every aspect of the wine making, the hands-on work, and I'm more guiding that, because it takes a crew to make wine. It's not a one-person job, and so Jim definitely participates in that, and I help out in the tasting room. But we try and keep some ownership over the two areas, and then when we're in the other, we're a helper.
Mm-hmm. Would you say your vision for what taste you're after is fairly compatible or similar?
It's amazingly compatible, actually. So, in general, we'll taste something and we'll be, oh yeah, that's the way we want it to taste, if we're doing a blending or whatever. So I think, in general, pretty close.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the reasons that Jim ended up being a partner, is because I would, so early on, Jim joined as a partner a few years into the process. In the meantime, I was bringing home barrel samples, and we were preparing for to put together blends and that kind of thing. And so I'd come home, Jim, can you come over and help me drink this wine?
That was the part. That was the part of the job I didn't really mind.
Yeah. And so we'd go through all these blends, and I kind of knew what I was after and what I thought about the wines, because I knew them as they were growing up. So I was really intimate with what the wines were. But sometimes that's a bad thing, because I remember something that it's not anymore. And so it flavors the perception of what the wine is now. So I didn't tell Jim anything, and we would do blending, we'd do trials, and he would describe what he was tasting and what he liked, and it was amazing that how similar it was to what I already thought. But it was good to get neutral opinion on that. And so we have really similar palates. When we go through blends, we end up with the same choice on things, and that's one of the more fun aspects of the business, for sure.
What would you describe as the taste that you're after? What do you want Seven Bridges Winery to be known for?
So again, our intention is big, full-bodied, tasty red wines. I mean, that's really the path we're on. I think for the most part, we accomplished that in a way that the wines are still approachable and drinkable now, but they're going to continue to get better for 10 years after we make them. So
yeah, we have in our list of wines, there's many different varietals and quite different styles, but they do have kind of a common thing of being pretty big in flavor. There's kind of a richness to them, which I think is a trait of our wines that I really like. But then others, I like to play with some different things. Certain grapes do well with more oak impact, whereas others very little, and so there are different things within the overall flavors, but there are also some common threads.
Was it a conscious decision to not do Pinot Noir?
Yes. I mean, it would be a lot easier to do Pinot Noir shorter drive to get the grapes. I like Pinot. I drink it, and I'm interested to try and make it, but that's not the wine that I gravitate towards when I'm looking for a wine. And so the wine that we make is exactly the wine that I like to drink. It is a very different winemaking style to make Pinot Noir than to make the Bordeaux reds and some of the other reds that we're making. And there's plenty of good Pinot out there, so we've kind of stuck with what we.
If nothing else, not doing Pinot is different than what most of either the valley wineries or the urban wineries do. So that should make us at least a little bit different than some of the other wineries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that wasn't deliberate or by design, but it definitely happens now. We go to tastings and people say, "I'd like to try your Pinot." And we say, well, "We don't have one," and they say, "No, really, come on." Really? Yeah, we don't. Yeah, so it gives us it's become an identity that we don't make Pinot.
That flows well into my next question, which is how do you market your reds in a sea of Pinot?
Mr. Sales and Marketing.
So like I said, I think they stand out for people who really like the bigger wines. Pinot's great. And Oregon is famous for Pinot. So what I think we're really trying to develop is an Oregon presence in the other reds, trying to match our wine and our message and our branding all kind of head in that direction. So trying to stand out amongst that sea of Pinot is really what we're trying to do.
So where do you get the grapes for the big bold red?
East.
Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously it's not hot enough here, although today pretty hot. But you really need a hot climate to grow the reds that we make. And so Eastern Oregon and Eastern Washington, basically all over the Columbia Valley, we get a lot of fruit from Walla Walla, Yakima, and some other areas like Echo, Oregon, some pretty obscure but really good growing conditions out there.
Have you thought about or dabbled in Southern Oregon grapes, or have you found this the East is what you're looking for?
So I grew up in Southern Oregon, so I'm very interested in possibly doing something down there. In fact, my parents still have a cattle ranch down there. We've looked at potential sites down there for either buying grapes or even planting grapes. So, there's probably some things on the horizon that will put us in that space.
Yeah, one of the difficulties in the labeling laws is has to do with blends, and so we do blend a lot of our reds. So when you blend, a certain percent of the grapes, most of them have to be from one AVA or region to be able to call it that. And so all of our grapes are Columbia Valley. Some of them are more specific, like Walla Walla or like Yakima. And then you have Southern Oregon with all of its AVAs. So if we had a grape that we got from down there and grapes that we got from Columbia Valley and wanted to include them in a blend together, we couldn't call it anything. We could just call it American wine. And that's not gonna sell well. So it's too bad, because it would be fun to, I think that's been an obstacle to us just experimenting with some grapes down there is, that logistic. But at some point, I'm sure we will try some grapes, and Jim will probably plant a vineyard and give me free grapes.
Exactly.
Excellent. And Bob, you indicated that you're pretty involved, at least with getting to know the grapes as they were growing through the season. Could you describe what that's like and how much work or intention you do with that part of it?
Yeah, so I'm very involved with from the time we start making the wine. So I know the wines from birth to bottle, but the grapes, I don't monitor terribly close what's going on in the vineyard. the approach I like to take is, first of all, it's very important what grapes we get, and the quality and everything about them. So what I found works well is to find a vineyard and a vineyard manager that I can work with in a way that I tell them what I'm looking for and say, how can you give me that? Because they are experts at growing grapes. I think it's silly for me to go in and tell them how to grow the grapes in their vineyard. And if I can tell them what I'm looking for, they deliver the grapes, I try it out, does it fit my winemaking style? And if it fits well or very well, then we've got a great match, and then we continue to use that vineyard. And it works really well. The grower likes it because they're growing the way they think it should be grown, and that's very repeatable and easy for them to know what to do, and I get a consistent result from it. So I like to go out and visit the vineyards. In fact, we're going tomorrow. We're going to go visit about half of our vineyards probably, and just kind of say hello, see how the vines are doing, get an idea for yield, any potential concerns, things like that are happening. But in terms of directing what's going to happen in the vineyard, I leave that to them.
So it's probably going to be 94, 95 degrees out there in Walla Walla tomorrow. So,
right. Stay cool out there.
Yeah.
What would you say your winemaking philosophy is?
Philosophy.
Or style?
Yeah. I think a lot of it is about the end product. There are a lot of people that don't like to do much, like to do things naturally, or like to they have a philosophy about the process, and for me it's more about the product. So whatever it takes to get there. I've learned a lot about different things I can do to manipulate the wines to have them become what I want, and sometimes they come in lacking something, and I try and figure out how to, either by blending or by adding some acidity to it, or whatever it might be, learning how to bring up the best in whatever the wine is. So I guess that's the philosophy. It's the wine's going to have a particular character regardless of what I do. It's still going to be able to tell that it's from a particular vineyard, that it's particular grape. All those things are going to be there. And then for me, it's trying to maximize the good qualities.
Yeah, I think one of the things that Bob is able to do, because of the breadth of vineyards that we get our grapes from, he's able to take a small amount of, say, Petit Verdot and add it to a specific varietal and say, okay, that really increases the flavor, or that really changes the way this wine, tastes and feels in your mouth. And it doesn't take that much. But again, if you didn't have that spread, the geographic spread, and all of the different options, because you were, tied to one specific vineyard, I think it really is a potential improvement.
So before you started the wine venture, what were your career backgrounds and expertise in?
We still have career backgrounds. I'm an engineer by training. I worked a bunch of places in Silicon Valley, semiconductor, software, telecom, kind of everything. And then more recently, and currently I work for a biotech company we do neurological research.
Okay. So still very much have another day job?
Yeah.
I also work for a high-tech company. In fact, Bob and I worked for the same company. We didn't know each other 20-something years ago.
Yeah.
And I work in sales, work mostly with one of our really large customers in the local area. So.
And then how did you get ready for the winery part, I guess? Was there some education, just some trial and error? What was that like to prepare for?
Bob gave me some books to read. I pretended like I read them.
Drank a lot of wine. Yeah.
Practiced. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, all of the above. I read a lot of books and suggested them to Jim, and a lot of trial and error. But my first start, as I mentioned, was with Kevin Ross, the other founder, and I started making wine with him. Didn't really know anything about the process, and then started reading and learning, and in the wine industry, people learn from each other a lot. And that's one of the things I really like about it, is people really share and help each other, and it's a nice community. But then the other side of it is there are definite things to learn. So I started taking some courses locally, and then ended up going through the UC Davis Winemakers certificate program, which was really great. It was a lot of work, but it was nice because it gave me a really solid foundation of I'll just say facts. So there were a lot of building blocks. It was interesting how little they taught how to make wine, and how much of it was these are all the elements and these are all the pieces, and everyone's going to make wine differently. So they're not teaching anything with regards to style or anything like that. It was just all about the mechanics and faults and how to fix or avoid and all these types of things. And so that gave me I feel a really good foundation, and also helped because winemakers are very helpful, and they're happy to offer advice, and sometimes it's wrong. You get these kind of urban myths about the way things work, and this is the cause and effect. What I learned was to be a real skeptic about a lot of that. So I always welcome advice, and then I'll if it sounds good, I'll go and confirm it and make sure that that really is the way it works.
And just the reading list for you?
Again, a lot of wine drinking.
It's important.
Yeah. He focuses more on the lab aspect of the course.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. Yeah. Please tell us the story behind the name of Seven Bridges Winery.
When we first started the winery, so Kevin and I played soccer together, and so we named the business after an Italian word for soccer, and that was kind of a placeholder. And then we were trying to think of the name, what we were going to call it, and it's really hard. It's almost worse than naming a child, trying to figure out what to call it. And so at the time we didn't have our location either. So we were planning the winery. We were going to maybe do it out of one of our garages, as a business, and that wasn't going to fly. So then some friends of ours were looking to buy a building for their business, and they wanted to buy a bigger building than what they needed, and they were going to lease out space. And we said, hey, find one that has space for a winery in it. And they did, and it was this building, and they said, hey, we've got there's a little basement, and it was about 1,500 square feet, and it had all concrete walls, pipes hanging down about 5 feet high, no electricity, no plumbing, and a ladder to get in and out. And we said, perfect, we'll take it.
Okay.
So it was, definitely a different phase of the business. So it was low budget. But then we're here, and at the location, it's right on the river. We've since moved upstairs into this much nicer space. But from this spot on the river, you can see Seven Bridges, and so it sounded good, and we decided to make that our name.
And I believe the label has soccer balls still incorporated?
It does.
Obviously purposefully.
It is. There's definitely a nod to a soccer ball somewhere on the label, if you can find it.
Good luck.
Yeah, we had some fun earlier when we were doing research.
Uh-huh.
So you touched on it a little bit, but we'd love to hear more on why choosing an urban winery versus going more rural, for example, and sort of the pros and cons of that.
So I think the advantage to our customers is, hey, you can go down to Seven Bridges and talk to the people who make the wine and see the wine in barrels, and get the exposure of what happens in a winery without having to drive 4 or 5 hours to get to Walla Walla. You can come here, especially for our wine club members, you can come in on pretty much any weekend, do a tasting, see how things are going, pick up a few bottles of wine. It's really, it's convenient, I think, as much as anything. And most of our wine is sold directly out of the tasting room. So that's kind of so far at least, that's been our business model, and it seems to be working. So.
Yeah, it's I love going out to the valley, going to visit vineyards and wineries. It's beautiful. It's a great experience, and this is too. It's just different, and so it's kind of just one more variable that you can do. And there's lots of urban wineries now, and the spaces are incredibly unique compared to what you would get when it's a more design. There's a classic winery. You expect to go out and I see the vines, and they've got big oak doors, and it's everyone likes that, and we do too. But this is people drive up, and I've seen people drive up and they look around and like, really, there's a I think we're in the wrong place. There's the sign. So and they come in, they're like, oh, and so it's just different, and it works really well in Portland.
How have you seen the Portland urban winery scene evolve in the time you've been here?
Well, it's evolved a lot. We started in 2008. We're at this point the third oldest winery in Portland, and so when we first came in, there wasn't much going on, but it was already kind of a close group, and we got together and formed PDX Urban Wineries, and most of the wineries in the city joined that right away. And that gave us a way to, kind of help each other out in terms of marketing, do some joint events, and just navigate the complexities and intricacies of having a winery in an urban setting. So it was kind of nice to have that brotherhood of wineries working together.
Yeah, I think if you looked across the United States, there are really only now there's a few different cities that have kind of an urban winery movement, and I think Portland's probably in the forefront of that movement. So things will continue to evolve for the coming years, and people will get in it and out of it. Hopefully, we'll be one of the businesses that stays afloat and can keep our business going. So,
in addition to the PDX Urban Wineries group, are you involved in some of the other organizations?
Not really. No, that's kind of the only one, and we've been. I think part of this is because we've been lucky enough in terms of sales and kind of word of mouth. Our sales has been mostly word of mouth. No offense to Jim.
No, it's true.
But so we haven't needed to be involved in these other groups to get exposure. We do some other. We go to some other events like Italy in the Valley, and that's fun. We have a couple of Italian varietals. We'll bring those. So those are all fun, and we get some extra contacts. And but mostly it's the PDX Urban Wineries. When we do other things, it's kind of for fun.
A lot of local events. We actually hosted the PDX Urban Wine event here in May. It was actually turned out really, really well. It was good. I think Bob did a nice job of arranging the space so there was enough room. I think maybe we had 150 people, in that afternoon. It was really nice.
Excellent. So you mentioned there's some complexities to being an urban winery and working together with the PDX Urban Wine Group. What are some of those complexities, and how have you been able to get over them or navigate them?
Right. It's mostly logistics in the winemaking process. So, if you go to kind of a normal, traditional winery, they have a big outside space where they do all the crush activities and they clean everything, and the water drains into a field or it drains, and we can't use the outside space at all. It's street outside, and so everything has to happen inside. And because it's all one space, we have production, barrel storage, tasting room, all of our case goods. You can't just take a hose and spray all over the place, for instance. So it's a challenge to come up with the logistical plan to separate those and to still be able to do things the way we want from a production standpoint. I think other than that, I think there's more advantages to being urban winery, because people are right here, so they can walk over. We have wine club members all over the neighborhood next to here, and some of them come over every weekend because they get free tasting and they take advantage of it, and it's great. So I think the benefits outweigh, but there are definitely some things that have to be done differently.
Although I like this space, and I think people, they're engaged in this space, it's hard to compete with, sitting out in the countryside looking across, acres and acres of grapevines growing on a beautiful, Saturday evening or whatever. So I think that's another challenge, and we just try and overcome that with, a really good atmosphere, doing what we can with the space that we have. So,
what's the future for Seven Bridges Winery? Where would you like to see it go?
It's a good question. It's because it's a secondary job for both of us. It's something that we enjoy tremendously, put a lot of work into, but it's also something that we have, I guess, the luxury of not having to have a very firm plan as far as that goes. We're growing still, although we slowed down our growth. Early on, we grew at anywhere from 30 to 50% year over year in production. Our first year in 2008, we had 350 cases, and we're up to about 2,500 cases now. But we've slowed that down, and now we're kind of trying to figure out how to, whether to stay at this level, and at this level, is it something, we're trying to strike a balance between having it be manageable, being able to make some money in the business at some point, but more importantly, to be able to continue to make the quality of wine that we're making. And so I think there is potentially an upper threshold on how much wine can be made and still have the attention to detail that we're able to achieve now. And so if we went above that, then there would be no point in doing this. That's just against our whole reason for having a winery in the first place.
Yeah, so Bob and I have, at least occasionally, sat down and tried to figure out a real good answer to your question, and we're still working on the exact answer. I will say, though, you have to plan well in advance. It's the cycle for making the wine. Right now we're selling wine that we made 3 years ago, right? So, and based on both the varietals that we pick, the blends that we make, and the volume. I mean, that's a lot of knobs to try and say what's going to work 3 years from now, as opposed to what's going to work, in a month. So it's an interesting question, and right now we're just, again, trying to grow as much as we can incrementally. So
that's fair. It is hard to predict at least 3 years out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because we look at 3 years ago, it's just crazy how different it was. So the decisions we make right now, for harvest, that's 3 and 4 years from now. That's when that comes to fruition. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Where do you see the future for Portland urban wineries in general? Where do you think that might evolve?
So my thought is, a dozen or so, maybe 15 urban wineries right now. I imagine that there's a limit. Although you look at how many breweries there are in Portland. Probably it's not going to approach that.
Yeah.
But there's some balance in there of being in that same space, and you've got the distillers in the area that are coming on. I think the industry's interesting, and I think people will continue to find space here. I would say at least 2 or 3 times as many as there are right now. So
Yeah, I definitely see it growing. I mean, it has been. It's almost an exponential curve in how fast the number of new wineries are coming into the city. I would agree that it's probably gonna be a lower number than the breweries, because the obstacle to making wine is trickier, because of the delay. You have to wait 3 years. With beer you can make it and sell it. So it makes you much more nimble in terms of a business, being able to adjust and do things. And so I think overall the obstacles to wineries are more difficult. So we'll see a somewhat lower number, but wow, I don't think it's anywhere close to what it's going to be.
What would your advice be for somebody wanting to enter into the urban wine scene?
Run.
It's I would recommend it. I mean, it's good. It's funny. We joke about it's very expensive to make wine. It's costly, and because you have all the inventory, for so many years, it is a big investment. One of the mistakes we made as we were entering the business was just really, even though you can kind of pencil things out and see, what that investment is going to be, I think sometimes you feel like, well, but we'll probably start selling something before, you can kind of convince yourself that it's going to be softer than it is, and the realities financially are that it's pretty tough. So you have to be prepared and just really plan it up front. But in terms of whether to do it or not, I think it's great. I definitely would recommend it.
Yeah, I would agree. So the way I see it is, it takes a real commitment. You don't think that you're gonna just get in this business and half-ass it. You really takes a commitment. It takes time. It takes money. It takes effort, and there's if you're not willing to do that, to give it that, your product's not probably going to be good, and you're probably not going to be successful. So.
Okay, those were all of my planned questions.
Okay.
Did you have anything that you want to talk about, or was there a question I should have asked?
I think you pretty much covered it all.
So that was good.
All right. Well, thank you both so much.